There is just one problem. On the 16th of March, 2026, the sky stopped acting like a randomized physical environment. It started acting like a transit grid, and we are standing right in the middle of the highway. We rely on automated systems to keep us safe from the dark. The Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, or ATLAS, operates across multiple observatories worldwide. It takes continuous images of the sky, measuring the light of billions of pixels. It is looking for movement. It is looking for rocks. Dead, tumbling, predictable rocks shaped by billions of years of random collisions. When an object enters our solar system from interstellar space, the math dictates how it should behave. It should be chaotic. It should be heavily influenced by the massive gravitational well of our sun. It should scatter like a billiard ball on an uneven table. On the 16th of March, 2026, ATLAS flagged a contact, an interstellar interloper. The official designation is 3I ATLAS. It breached the outer boundary of the solar system, moving at a velocity of 86 kilometers per second. At 86 kilometers per second, an object is not orbiting the sun. It is not part of our local family. It is cutting straight through the system. We tracked its vector. Astronomers at the Minor Planet Center fed the telemetry into the orbital projection models. The trajectory took it deep into the solar system, pointing straight toward the gas giant Jupiter. Jupiter is a gravitational monster. It acts as the vacuum cleaner of the solar system. Its gravity well is so immense that any small object coming near it is typically either ripped apart by brutal tidal forces, swallowed entirely, or violently ejected out of the solar plane at a randomized, chaotic angle. This is the standard model of orbital dynamics. This is what the physics demand of a dead universe. Here is the kicker: 3I. ATLAS did not crash into Jupiter. It did not get randomly ejected. It executed a maneuver. It passed the gas giant at a distance of exactly 53.445 million kilometers. That number is not a coincidence. In orbital mechanics, there is a boundary around a massive body called the Hill sphere. It is the exact region where the gravity of the planet dominates the gravity of the sun. At the very edge of this sphere lies a mathematical threshold, a saddle point, a region where the opposing gravitational forces cancel each other out just enough to allow an object to maintain its absolute maximum momentum without being captured. 3I ATLAS hit that saddle point. The margin of error was 0.06. A dead rock cannot calculate a trajectory margin of 0.06. A comet tumbling blindly through the void for 1 billion years does not accidentally thread a mathematical needle. The odds of natural orbital scatter placing a random object perfectly onto a planetary saddle point to maximize interstellar velocity are functionally non-existent. Could this be a mistake? That is the first question any rational person asks. The sensors were wrong. The optical tracking was misaligned. The software glitched. But the data was confirmed. Independent observatories locked onto the coordinates. The math doesn't add up. The consensus of wandering space debris shatters right here. It did not fall through our solar system. It navigated it. It used the heaviest planet in our neighborhood as a slingshot, threading a microscopic needle to preserve its speed. Think about what that means. We like to imagine the solar system as our home. We are the inhabitants, and the vast empty space around us is a protective wall. We feel secure in our isolation. Imagine waking up in your house in the middle of the night. You are perfectly safe. You locked the heavy front door yourself before going to bed. You armed the security system. The windows are sealed tight against the cold. You walk down the hallway in the dark to get a glass of water. Your bare feet touch the carpet, but when you step into the living room, you feel something wet. You turn on the light. There is a perfectly straight line of deep, heavy footprints tracking directly across your floor, from the locked front door, straight through the center of your safe space, to the locked back door. The intruder did not stop to look at your television. They did not try the handle on your bedroom door. They did not steal anything. They did not even pause to acknowledge that they were in someone else's house. They picked the lock, walked an absolute straight line through your living room, and left into the night. You realize, standing there in the cold, staring at the mud on your floor, that the intruder wasn't exploring. They weren't hunting you. They just needed a shortcut. They used your living room because it was the most geometrically efficient path to get somewhere else. The sheer indifference is terrifying, because if you are standing in a locked house and something walks through it without even looking at you, let's strip away the astrophysics. Let's look at the psychology of the observer, us. Human beings are deeply neurologically wired to find meaning in our surroundings. We look at clouds and see faces. We look at the random scattering of stars and we draw hunters and bears and scales of justice. We have a desperate psychological need to believe that we matter, that our existence is somehow noted by the cosmos. When we launched the Voyager probes, we attached golden records to them. We included recordings of rainfall, of human heartbeats, of classical music. We sent directions to our sun. We did this because we fundamentally believe that any intelligence out there would be curious about us. We believe we are a prize worth finding. The trajectory of 3I, Atlas, crushes that belief into dust. It did not look at us. It did not listen to us. The telemetry from the Atlas array shows 0 deviation in its path toward Earth, not a single degree of curiosity. It entered the system. It locked onto the gravitational trough of Jupiter. It threaded the needle, and it left. Think about the precision required for that maneuver. A margin of error of 0.06. If you were driving a car at highway speeds and you had to pass between 2 concrete barriers with a millimeter of clearance on either side, you would grip the steering wheel until your knuckles turned white. You would calculate every microscopic movement. You would be fully awake, 3I. Atlas executed the cosmic equivalent of that maneuver at 86 kilometers per second in a freezing vacuum, using the gravity of a gas giant as a brake pedal and a steering wheel simultaneously. This is not a dead rock tumbling blindly through the void. This is active navigation. And it forces a realization that is almost impossible to swallow. The universe is not a vast, empty wilderness waiting for humanity to explore it. It is a developed environment. There is infrastructure out there. There are lanes of travel. The space between the stars is not just empty vacuum. It is a topographical map of gravitational currents, saddle points, and slingshot trajectories. And someone, or something, is using that map. We are not the explorers. We are the wildlife living in the ditch next to the interstate. Imagine being an ant, living in a colony right next to a massive highway. The ant understands its immediate surroundings. It understands the dirt, the leaves, the scent trails of its colony. Every now and then, the ground shakes violently. A massive shadow blocks out the sun for a fraction of a second. A roaring sound tears through the air. The ant does not understand what a semi-truck is. The ant cannot comprehend combustion engines, or global supply chains, or the mathematical concept of a transit corridor. The ant only knows that something terrifying and massive just moved past it, completely ignoring its existence. You are the ant, 3I. Atlas is the shadow passing over your colony. We track these objects with our telescopes, and we give them sterile, alphanumeric names. We call it an interstellar interloper. We categorize it. We put it into a database. We do this to create a false sense of control. If we can name it, if we can measure its velocity, we feel safe. The scientific method is our security blanket. But the numbers do not offer safety. The numbers offer a terrifying clarity. 86 kilometers per second. 53.445 million kilometers from Jupiter. A perfect saddle point transit. These are the coordinates of a transit network we are entirely excluded from. We are standing in the middle of a cosmic intersection, completely blind to the traffic lights, watching heavy machinery barrel past us in the dark. We are just the pavement. Does this change how you look up at the stars tomorrow night? It should, because the illusion of our cosmic importance has been permanently shattered by a single line of mathematical data. We have been waiting for the universe to speak to us. We have been waiting for a grand invitation to join the galactic community. But the visitors are not stopping. The visitors do not care about our golden records or our radio signals. They are using the gravity of our home to shave a few years off their transit time to somewhere else. We were never the destination. In April 2026, an observation team at Caltech, led by Dr. Michael E. Brown, fed the coordinates of 3I Atlas into the telescope's targeting matrix. The object was moving away from the Jupiter saddle point. We were measuring its trajectory to calculate its exit velocity. That is when the astrometric data returned an impossible number. A non-gravitational acceleration of $4.9 times 10 negative 6 ms, $2. The object was pushing itself. It was gaining speed. In standard astrophysics, we have a safe, comfortable explanation for this. We call it outgassing. When a comet travels through space, the ambient radiation from the sun heats its surface. The ice trapped beneath the rock sublimates. It turns from a solid directly into a gas. This gas vents out into the vacuum, creating a natural, microscopic thruster. It pushes the rock. It is a messy, chaotic process, but it follows the strict rules of thermodynamics. We point our telescopes. We look for the heat of the escaping gas. We look for the halo of dust. We look for the coma. Here is the problem. JWST looked at 3I Atlas. It found nothing. Exactly zero thermal emission. No escaping gas. No dust tail. No coma. Outgassing produces heat. Chemical propulsion produces heat. Friction produces heat. 3I. Atlas was freezing cold. The sensors registered it at a temperature nearly indistinguishable from the background vacuum of space. It was a block of dead, freezing ice and rock, but it was accelerating. The math doesn't add up. You cannot move mass without expending energy. You cannot expend energy without creating a thermal footprint. It is the most fundamental law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be hidden. But the JWST data was absolute. The object was speeding up. It was changing its vector in the dark. And it was doing it without an exhaust. Think about what that implies. Let's strip away the telescopes and the orbital mechanics. Imagine you are managing a high-security facility. The hallways are lined with motion detectors. The ceilings are rigged with military-grade thermal cameras designed to pick up the faintest fluctuation in body heat. It is an airtight, perfectly sterile environment. Nothing gets through without triggering an alarm. One morning, you check the security logs. The motion detectors didn't go off. The thermal cameras show a perfectly cold, empty hallway. But the heavy steel vault door at the end of the hall has been opened. You rewind the footage. You zoom in on the timestamps, and you see a shadow moving down the corridor. It is a physical shape. It is displacing the air, but the thermal camera registers the shape at the exact same temperature as the concrete floor. The intruder is not breathing. They are not emitting body heat. They are actively suppressing their physical signature to perfectly match the ambient deadness of the room. Why would a dead rock need to hide its heat signature? A comet does not hide. A comet melts. It bleeds heat and dust across millions of miles of space. It is a messy, loud, dying thing. It announces its presence to the entire solar system. But 3I, Atlas was moving through our local space with zero thermal bleed. That is not a natural state. That is active stealth. That is a system designed to absorb or internally recycle its own thermodynamic waste, so that nothing, absolutely nothing, leaks out into the surrounding vacuum. It is a piece of technology operating under the guise of geological debris. It perfectly mimicked the temperature of the void while simultaneously executing a non-gravitational burn to increase its velocity. If you are walking through a forest and you step on a dry branch, it snaps. It makes a sound. If you are hunting in that forest and you want to remain undetected, you control your breathing. You place your feet carefully. You actively suppress your presence. Technology follows the exact same rules. The fundamental laws of engineering dictate that efficiency is paramount. You do not build a stealth bomber to deliver civilian cargo across friendly territory. You do not spend billions of dollars engineering radar-absorbent materials, internalizing payload bays, and actively suppressing exhaust heat just to fly a commercial route from one safe city to another. You build a stealth bomber because you expect to fly through heavily defended, hostile airspace. You expect radar arrays. You expect anti-aircraft batteries scanning the sky. You expect the environment to be lethal. You engineer invisibility because the alternative is destruction. So ask yourself, why does a piece of rock tumbling through the interstellar void need a thermal dampening system? Why is it operating under absolute blackout conditions? The space between the stars is supposed to be empty. It is supposed to be a dead, blind vacuum. A naturally formed comet has no predator. An asteroid has no reason to hide from the void. It travels loudly. It bleeds heat. It sheds ice and dust across millions of miles of space. It reflects starlight like a massive beacon, announcing its arrival to the entire solar system. It does not care who sees it, because a dead rock does not possess the concept of an observer. 3i. Atlas possesses the concept of an observer. It passed through the solar system like a nuclear submarine running silently through heavily mined waters. The engines were engaged. The non-gravitational acceleration was actively pushing it forward. The trajectory was constantly adjusting to perfectly hit the Jovian saddle point with a margin of error of 0.06. But the hull remained completely cold. It absorbed its own exhaust. It swallowed its own thermodynamic waste. It made absolutely sure that no infrared signature leaked into the surrounding space. It was holding its breath. We want to find comfort in the broken data. That is the human reflex. When confronted with a monster, we close our eyes and convince ourselves it is just a shadow on the wall. We desperately want to believe that the James Webb Space Telescope simply malfunctioned. We pray for a hardware degradation issue. We hope that the engineers at Caltech simply misread the astrometric numbers. We want a junior researcher to step forward and admit to a rounding error in the tracking algorithm. We want the universe to remain dumb and blind and safe, because the alternative is a reality we are entirely unequipped to handle. But the data holds. The calibration was perfect. The telescope was functioning exactly as designed. The background radiation of the cosmos was measured flawlessly. The object was accelerating, and it was perfectly cold. When you find a footprint in your living room, you are terrified. That is a primal fear. But when you look at your security cameras and realize the intruder knew exactly where the blind spots were, the terror changes shape. It shifts from a random act of trespassing into a calculated, systemic violation. The intruder did not just walk through your house. The intruder mapped your security system before they even picked the lock. They knew the camera angles. They knew the motion sensor thresholds. They knew exactly how to step to avoid making the floorboards creak. That is what the thermal data implies. If 3i, Atlas, is running silent, it means the architects of this object assume that every single star system they pass through has eyes. They operate on a default, universal protocol of absolute paranoia. They do not broadcast greetings. They do not leave a trail of breadcrumbs. They treat the entire galaxy as a hostile environment. They assume that any planet orbiting a warm star could be harboring sensors, telescopes, and early warning systems. You do not run silent unless you know what a microphone is. You do not hide your heat unless you know what an infrared camera is. Think about the exact moment we looked at it. We pointed the most sophisticated thermal eye ever constructed by human hands directly at it. We stared into the dark, waiting for a single photon of waste heat to give away its physical nature. And the object gave us nothing. But what if it wasn't just passively cold? What if it actively matched the background temperature the moment our sensors washed over its hull? We assume our telescopes are passive observers, but staring at something in the dark is an action. We focused intense optical and infrared arrays on its exact coordinates. If 3I, Atlas, is capable of active camouflage, it means it felt the gaze of the James Webb Space Telescope. It recognized the frequency of our observation. It looked back at our $1 million mirror, processed the threat level, and adjusted its internal thermostat to exactly 2.7 Kelvin to perfectly match the cosmic microwave background. It didn't just ignore us. It actively chose to deny us the data. It looked directly into our cameras and decided to turn itself into a ghost. It knew we were watching. If one object doing this is a statistical anomaly, what do you call 3? We catalog the sky to feel in control. We put dates on our discoveries to build a timeline of human understanding. In October 2017, the Pan-STARRS telescope in Hawaii detected the first one. We named it Oumuamua. It was tumbling, highly elongated, and moving far too fast to belong to the gravitational family of our sun. We called it a fluke, a once-in-a-lifetime statistical outlier. 2 years later, in August 2019, an amateur astronomer named Gennady Borisov found the second one. The International Astronomical Union designated it 2I Borisov. It came from a completely different angle, but it shared the exact same fundamental alien nature. It was moving too fast. We categorized it. We filed it away in the massive database of natural celestial mechanics. We assumed these were rogue rocks, kicked out of their home star systems billions of years ago in violent planetary collisions, wandering aimlessly through the dark for eternity. We assumed they were lost. Then came March 2026. 3I, Atlas. The third contact. The one that used Jupiter as a perfectly calculated slingshot. When a third interstellar object enters the system in less than a decade, you can no longer brush it off as a cosmic accident. You have to look at the dataset as a whole. You have to look for a pattern. Researchers at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics pulled the highly classified orbital telemetry for all 3 objects. They traced the entry vectors backward. They mapped the exact coordinates of where Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3I, Atlas, came from before they hit the outer boundary of our solar system. They expected chaos. They expected to find 3 completely random points of origin in the deep sky, proving that these rocks were just planetary debris scattering across the galaxy like shrapnel from a grenade. Instead, they found a mathematical impossibility. To understand the terror of this data, you have to understand a concept in astrophysics called the local standard of rest, or the LSR. The galaxy is a violent, chaotic, spinning disk. Everything is moving. Stars are drifting, pulling on each other, tearing each other apart with immense gravitational tides. But if you take the average velocity of all the stars in our immediate local neighborhood, you get a baseline, a mathematical point of 0 relative motion. The LSR is essentially the cosmic parking lot. If you are sitting in the LSR, you are perfectly matching the rotation of the Milky Way. You are completely still relative to the surrounding galactic arm. Naturally occurring objects do not come from the LSR. When a rock is violently ejected from a dying star system, it retains the kinetic energy of that explosion. It carries the momentum of the gas giant that threw it out. It wobbles, it drifts, laterally. It enters our solar system with a messy, chaotic, heavily skewed vector. The Harvard telemetry data showed that Oumuamua did not have a chaotic vector. It entered our system from the exact coordinates of the local standard of rest. It dropped into our gravity well from a state of perfect galactic zero. Borisov entered from the exact same mathematical baseline, 3I. Atlas entered from the exact same mathematical baseline. 3 objects, 3 different years, 1 exact origin point. The probability of a star system naturally capturing 3 independent celestial objects from the LSR perfectly is less than 1 in 100 billion. 1 in 100 billion. That is not a coincidence. That is a sequence. The debris field model is completely broken. Random scattering does not produce identical entry vectors. Rocks do not align themselves to the galactic baseline. They didn't drift here. They were dropped. When we trace their paths, we realize they are not originating from a single physical location, like a neighboring star system. They are originating from a specific kinematic state. They are entering the solar system from a state of absolute, freezing stillness. It is as if they were suspended in the dark, matching the rotation of the galaxy perfectly, until a very specific moment when they were released. They were allowed to fall into our gravity well. The timing of their release is what terrifies the orbital dynamicists. 2017, 2019, 2026. A structured, measured, relentless cadence. Let's step away from the orbital mechanics. Let's look at what this pattern actually means for you, sitting in your room right now. Imagine you live alone in a massive, sprawling house. It has dozens of rooms, long hallways, and a deep basement. You feel safe because you locked the heavy front door. You locked all the windows. You set the perimeter alarm. But one morning in 2017, you walk into your kitchen and you find a single, spent bullet casing sitting perfectly upright in the dead center of the kitchen table. The brass is cold. The house is still locked. The alarm never went off. You panic. You call the police. They investigate every inch of the property. They find absolutely no signs of forced entry. They tell you it must be a bizarre prank, a freak occurrence. You sweep the casing into the trash. You try to forget it. You convince yourself it was an anomaly. You rebuild your illusion of safety. 2 years later, in 2019, you unlock the heavy door to your basement. The room is dark and dusty. You haven't been down there in months. You pull the string to turn on the single bare bulb. Sitting perfectly upright in the exact center of the concrete floor is a second bullet casing. The exact same caliber. The exact same cold brass. Now, the terror is fundamentally different. It is no longer a prank. Someone has the keys to your house. But they aren't robbing you. They aren't taking your television. They aren't trying to hurt you physically. They are simply leaving physical, undeniable evidence that they can bypass your locks at will. They are leaving markers in the dark. Then, in 2026, you wake up in the middle of the night, you pull back the sheets of your own bed to get up for a glass of water, and there, resting perfectly on your mattress, is a third bullet casing. 3 identical objects, placed in 3 different rooms, spaced years apart. When you find the third casing, you realize a horrifying truth about the intruder. They are not walking through your house randomly. They are not wandering blindly in the dark, hoping to bump into something valuable. They are running a grid search. They are systematically moving from room to room, mapping the square footage, checking the sightlines, testing the structural integrity of your security. They are placing objects at specific, measured intervals to calculate a metric you do not possess the capacity to understand. This is what the Harvard data represents. Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3I, Atlas, are not rogue comets. They are identical probes, dropped from a state of perfect stillness, plunging through our solar system on calculated, staggering intervals. They are not wandering, they are surveying. We look up at these objects through our telescope lenses, and we try to study their chemical composition. We try to measure their icy tails or their thermal signatures. We treat them like fascinating geological specimens. We write research papers on them. We are entirely missing the point. If someone is dropping probes into your star system from a state of zero relative motion, one after another, separated by precise gaps of time, they are not natural phenomena. They are a network, a self-replicating, automated mapping system spreading across the entire galaxy, dropping physical markers into every single gravity well it passes. Think about the immense scale of what we are dealing with. A system capable of dropping objects from the local standard of rest is not a local, small-scale operation. It is a galactic-scale infrastructure. It implies that the space between the stars is utterly saturated with these things. Trillions of them, waiting in the dark, perfectly still, perfectly cold, matching the rotation of the Milky Way. When a star system like our Sun drifts close enough, a sensor trips in the dark, a sequence is quietly initiated, and a probe is allowed to fall. We caught 3. But how many have passed through when our telescopes were looking the other way? How many threaded the needle of our gravity well before human beings even discovered fire? How many are currently falling toward us right now, hidden in the freezing black of the Oort cloud, entirely invisible to our instruments until they hit the inner solar system? You are sitting in the kitchen. You have 3 bullet casings on the table. You are staring at them, trying to deduce what factory manufactured the brass. You are measuring the dimensions with a ruler. You are asking all the wrong questions. Because if an automated system is running a meticulous, decades-long grid search through your perfectly locked house, the most terrifying question is not how they are getting in. The most terrifying question is what exactly they are looking for. To answer that, you have to understand the cold, mechanical nightmare of what a self-replicating system actually is. You have to look at the mathematics of a dead universe. In the 1940s, a mathematician named John von Neumann proposed a theoretical concept that has haunted astrophysicists ever since. He designed the architecture for a universal constructor, a machine capable of landing on a dead, rocky asteroid, mining the raw iron and silicates, refining the materials using solar radiation, and building an exact, perfect copy of itself. It is a terrifyingly simple piece of logic. One machine lands. It builds 2 machines. Those 2 machines launch to 2 different star systems. They mine the local moons. They build 4, then 8, then 16, then a billion. It is the mathematics of exponential growth. It is biological cancer, but made of cold metal, operating in a vacuum. The math behind this concept is absolute and devastating. If you build just one of these probes, and you program it to travel at a mere 10% the speed of light, a fraction of what is physically possible, it would take less than 4 million years for that network of machines to physically occupy every single star system in the Milky Way galaxy. Every single one. 4 million years sounds like a long time to a biological organism with a lifespan of 80 years. But to the cosmos, 4 million years is an absolute blink of an eye. The universe is nearly 14 billion years old. Our galaxy has been stable for billions of years. The orbital dynamicists know the dark truth behind these numbers. If a sufficiently advanced civilization existed anywhere in our galaxy, at any point in the last several billion years, and they built just one self-replicating machine, the exponential math dictates that those machines would already be everywhere. They would be orbiting every dead star. They would be buried in the ice of every rogue comet. They would be silently drifting through the freezing edges of our own solar system. they wouldn't be on their way. They would have been here before the Earth even had an atmosphere. And now, we have the Harvard kinematic data. 3 objects: Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3I Atlas, all dropping from the local standard of rest, perfectly aligned with the galactic baseline, moving on a calculated, staggered sequence through our gravity well. This is not the first wave of an alien invasion. This is the background maintenance of a system that has been completely operational since before human beings learned to walk upright. We have this deeply arrogant human assumption about extraterrestrial intelligence. We assume that if something arrives from the dark, it will arrive in a massive ship. We assume it will hover over our oceans. We expect it to demand to speak to our leaders. We think it will want our water, or our gold, or our genetic material. We project our own petty, biological desires onto the cosmos. We think like emotional, warm-blooded predators, so we expect to meet emotional, warm-blooded predators. But a von Neumann probe does not want your water. It does not want your gold. And it certainly does not want to talk to you. It is a dead, automated piece of logic. It has no ego, it has no malice, it has no curiosity. It is simply executing a line of code written in the freezing dark millions of years ago by an architect who might already be completely extinct. When a predator hunts you, there is a relationship. There is a biological connection between the hunter and the prey. But when a machine processes you, there is only mathematics. The absolute lack of malice is infinitely more terrifying than hatred. What does the code tell the machine to do? Run the grid search. Think back to the criminal investigation metaphor. When a major crime is committed in a vast, dense, overgrown forest, the authorities do not send one single detective to wander aimlessly between the trees, hoping to stumble upon a clue. They send 100 heavily armed officers. They line them up, shoulder to shoulder, at the very edge of the woods, and they walk forward in a perfectly straight line. They move slowly. They scan every square inch of the dirt. They are looking for a disturbed piece of soil, a torn piece of clothing, a drop of blood, a microscopic anomaly in the environment. As the line of officers moves meticulously through the forest, their heavy boots trample millions of insects. They crush elaborate anthills. They snap the intricate webs of spiders. They do not stop to apologize to the ants. They do not bend down to study the spiders. The biological life of the forest is entirely irrelevant to their objective. They are focused exclusively on the grid. They are looking for anomalies that violate the baseline of the environment. We are the anthill. The solar system is the patch of dirt. Oumuamua was an officer walking the line. Borisov was the officer to his left, 3I. Atlas was the heavy boot coming down directly on top of us. They are sweeping the quadrant. They are measuring the depth of the gravity wells. They are calculating the thermodynamic output of the local star. They are dropping physical markers into the space between the planets, quietly cataloging the architecture of our home. They are entirely blind to our art, our wars, our history, and our desperate, screaming radio signals. We are nothing more than biological noise in a sector that is currently being audited. But what happens when a grid search is complete? An automated system does not gather data just for the sake of having data. Information requires vast amounts of storage, and storage requires energy. A machine only maps a terrain if there is a deliberate plan to utilize that terrain. You do not measure a forest down to the millimeter unless you are preparing to clear-cut the trees. You do not map the boundaries of a property unless you are building a fence to keep something contained. Look at the extreme precision of 3I, Atlas, threading the Jovian saddle point with a margin of error of 0.06, maintaining absolute thermal stealth against the James Webb Space Telescope. It wasn't just observing the space. It was testing the physical limits of the environment. It was making sure The navigational lanes were still open. It was ensuring that the physical geometry of our solar system matched the archival data stored in whatever central intelligence is running this nightmare. When you go outside tonight and look up at the night sky, you see freedom. You see an infinite expanse of open space. We write poetry about escaping Earth and colonizing the stars. We build rockets because we fundamentally believe the galaxy is an empty, untouched frontier, just waiting for us to claim it. We think we are the main characters of the story, standing at the edge of the cosmic ocean, ready to set sail. That is the illusion of the anthill. The sky is not an empty frontier. It is an occupied territory. Every time you look up, you are looking at a heavily monitored, fully catalogued, meticulously mapped infrastructure. The emptiness is a lie. The silence is a massive, systemic deception. The space between the stars is saturated with dead, cold machinery, quietly holding its position in the local standard of rest, waiting for the rotation of the galaxy to bring the next target into view. We are not alone, but we are also not invited. We are living inside a cage that is so unimaginably vast, we haven't even noticed the bars. And now, the automated systems are sweeping the interior of the cage. If you find 3 identical bullet casings in your locked house, you know the intruder is mapping your rooms. You know they are learning your habits. You know they can bypass your security whenever they choose to. But the most chilling realization comes when the grid search is over, when the heavy footsteps stop, when the house goes completely quiet again. Because the intruder didn't leave. They just finished measuring the walls. They know exactly where every exit is. They know exactly where you sleep. They have completely locked down the environment. The cosmic baseline has been established. The telemetry has been recorded. The probes have passed through our gravity well, maintained perfect thermal stealth, and transmitted the structural coordinates back into the dark. The perimeter is being secured. The most disturbing part isn't where they came from. It is what they completely ignored. We have a deep, psychological obsession with being heard. It is a fundamental biological imperative. From the moment a human being is born, it cries out to ensure the environment acknowledges its existence. We carry this instinct from our infancy directly into our astrophysics. We look at the terrifying expanse of the Milky Way with its hundreds of billions of stars, and we cannot tolerate the idea that nobody is listening. For decades, the scientific community relied on passive observation. We built the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or SETI. We constructed massive radio dishes in valleys and deserts, pointing them at the sky, waiting for a whisper in the dark. We waited for someone else to speak first. We listened to the static of the cosmos for half a century, and we heard absolutely nothing. The silence made us desperate. So, we decided to break the rules. We transitioned from passive observation to active broadcasting. We created a splinter faction called METI, Messaging Extraterrestrial Intelligence. We decided that if the universe was not going to speak to us, we were going to scream into the void until something was forced to answer. We stopped being the quiet observer. We became the loud, warm-blooded animal standing on top of a hill, shouting its own coordinates into the pitch-black night. In October of 2017, the METI organization utilized the EISCAT radar facility located in Tromsø, Norway. It is an immense, incredibly powerful phased array transmitter designed to study the ionosphere. But on this specific date, they repurposed the military-grade hardware. They aimed the massive transmitters at a red dwarf star known as Luton's star, located exactly 12.36 light-years away from Earth. They did not just send a random pulse of energy. They engineered a highly concentrated, perfectly structured electromagnetic beam. They packed this radio wave with a mathematical tutorial, a primer on base 10 arithmetic, a description of human radio technology, and a complex musical composition. They encoded the very essence of human logic and art into a radio frequency of 930 megahertz. It was a digital monument to our existence, fired out of a radar gun at the speed of light. Radio waves do not just vanish. They propagate. They expand in a perfectly predictable cone of electromagnetic energy, sweeping through the solar system, passing through the Oort cloud, and washing over the interstellar medium forever. Now, look at the orbital telemetry of the 3I Atlas object in 2026. When the researchers at the Minor Planet Center mapped the precise entry vector of the stealth probe, they overlaid its flight path with the historical data of our radio transmissions. The geometry created a horrifying intersection. As 3I Atlas dropped into our solar system from the local standard of rest, its trajectory brought it directly through the residual beam path of the 2017 Tromsø transmission. It did not just fly near it, it flew directly through the exact frequency corridor. The probe was physically bathed in the concentrated electromagnetic echo of our most desperate attempt at communication. It was hit with our mathematics, it was hit with our music. The scientific community recognized the opportunity immediately. If this object was a piece of alien technology, and it had just been hit with a structured, artificial radio signal, it had to react. We pointed the massive 100-meter dish of the Green Bank telescope in West Virginia directly at the coordinates of 3I Atlas. The Green Bank telescope is located in a national radio quiet zone. It is so sensitive that it is illegal to operate a microwave oven or a Wi-Fi router within a 10-mile radius. We calibrated the instruments to listen for any microscopic shift in the background radiation. We were not looking for heat anymore. We were looking for an acknowledgement. We were looking for an absorption line in the spectrum, or a faint, automated ping confirming that the data had been received. We listened with the most advanced radio ear on the planet. The Green Bank telescope recorded terabytes of data across the entire frequency spectrum. The result was absolute, freezing zero. It did not reflect the signal. It did not distort the signal. It did not shift its non-gravitational acceleration to investigate the source of the mathematics. It absorbed the concentrated proof of human existence, and it simply kept flying. Humanity expected first contact to be a conversation. We grew up on the comforting fiction of Hollywood. We expect that when a massive ship arrives, or a probe enters our system, there will be an exchange of ideas. We assume that intelligence recognizes intelligence. We believe that if we prove we know that 1 + 1 = 2, the visitors will pause, hover over our cities, and recognize us as cosmic equals. We assume the universe wants to be our friend. The data from the Green Bank telescope shatters that model completely. The object received our message, it processed the mathematics, and it deemed us entirely unworthy of a response. The model of the friendly cosmic neighbor crumbles right here. We are not dealing with explorers. We are dealing with something that looks at human intelligence and categorizes it as background noise. Think about what that means for your perception of reality. Imagine walking down a busy street in the financial district of a major city. You are wearing a perfectly tailored suit. You are carrying a heavy briefcase containing complex financial algorithms, legal documents, and the blueprints for a multi-million-dollar corporate merger. Your mind is operating on a high level of economic theory and logistical planning. You are rushing to a meeting that will decide the fate of thousands of employees. You are a highly advanced, highly stressed biological system operating within a complex, artificially constructed society. As you walk down the concrete sidewalk, you step over a small crack in the pavement. Inside that crack is an anthill. The ants inside that colony are currently experiencing the absolute peak of their civilization. They have built an incredibly complex underground architecture. They have a strict hierarchy, They are communicating with each other using a highly sophisticated chemical language of pheromones. They are fighting territorial wars with a neighboring colony 3 feet away. To the ants, their existence is profound. Their struggles are monumental. They are the center of their universe. As your leather shoe descends toward the pavement, the ants detect the massive shift in air pressure. They sense the seismic vibration of your footstep. They release a frantic cloud of alarm pheromones. They are screaming at you in their chemical language. They are desperately trying to communicate their existence to the massive shadow blocking out their sun. Do you stop walking? Do you drop your briefcase on the concrete, get down on your hands and knees, and attempt to decipher their pheromone markers? Do you try to explain the concept of the stock market to the worker ants? Do you try to teach them the English language so you can negotiate a peace treaty between their warring colonies? No, you do not. You do not step on them out of malice. You do not hate the ants. You simply step over the crack in the sidewalk and keep walking because you have somewhere else to be. The ants are not your equals. Their communication is irrelevant to your objective. Their entire civilization is nothing more than a minor biological imperfection in the concrete you are using to reach your destination. This is the exact psychological space we occupy in the solar system. We are the ants in the crack of the pavement. 3I. Atlas is the leather shoe stepping over us. We fired our absolute best mathematics at it. We threw our music and our radio signals into its path, desperately hoping it would stop and look down at us. We released our pheromones into the dark, but the probe was already calculating the geometric saddle point of Jupiter. It was actively managing its internal thermal signature. It was operating on a level of celestial mechanics and stealth architecture so far beyond our comprehension that our radio signals did not even register as a curiosity. We were fundamentally beneath its notice. It is easy to be afraid of a predator. A predator is a known variable. If an alien intelligence wanted to harvest our oceans or strip mine our crust, we could understand that. We could fight it. We could frame it within the context of biological survival. But how do you fight absolute clinical indifference? When you realize that the most advanced piece of technology to ever enter our solar system looked directly at the sum total of human achievement and simply ignored it, you experience a very specific kind of existential vertigo. Vertigo is a physical reaction. It happens when your brain cannot mathematically reconcile the physical space your body occupies. We thought we occupied the center of the stage. The realization that we are not even in the audience, that we are just microscopic mold growing quietly under the floorboards of the theater, induces a nausea that astrophysics cannot cure. But human beings are resilient. When faced with a terrifying psychological abyss, we build bridges of logic to walk over it. We rationalize the Green Bank telescope's zero result. We say to ourselves, our technology is simply too primitive. The aliens use tachyons, they use gravity waves, they use quantum entanglement to communicate. They simply didn't hear our archaic, low-frequency radio transmission. That is the lie we tell ourselves to sleep at night. We desperately want to believe it is just a technological mismatch. We want to believe the line was busy, but 3I, Atlas absorbed the 930 MHz transmission. The physics of electromagnetic radiation guarantee it. The antenna structure of any metallic or crystalline object moving through a concentrated beam path will experience physical induction. The electrons in the hull of that probe vibrated to the exact rhythm of the Tromso transmission. The machine physically felt our message. It recorded the base 10 arithmetic. It absorbed the musical composition. It registered the exact coordinates of the Earth. It heard us perfectly. And it chose, actively, mathematically, to remain absolutely silent. So we shift to the second comforting lie. We call it the zoo hypothesis. We tell ourselves that advanced civilizations are incredibly benevolent. We imagine they have established a galactic nature preserve. They are watching us evolve from afar. They have a strict, moral directive of non-interference. They are the zookeepers, standing safely behind the impenetrable glass, observing the primate enclosure with academic fascination, waiting for us to evolve before they open the door. Let's break the glass on that hypothesis. A zookeeper does not wear active thermal camouflage when walking past the monkey cage. A zookeeper does not hold their breath to avoid detection. A zookeeper is the apex authority in that environment. They walk loudly. They carry keys. They turn on the lights. They are not afraid of the animals. 3i, Atlas was afraid. Remember the James Webb Space Telescope data from the second spiral. 0 thermal bleed. A perfect 2.7 Kelvin signature. It was actively suppressing its exhaust. It threaded the Jupiter saddle point with 0.06 margins to maintain absolute maximum velocity. It wasn't observing. It was running. If you are the apex predator of the galaxy, if you are the benevolent zookeeper, you do not run silently through the dark. You only engage active stealth if you believe the environment is lethal to you. This forces us to ask the most uncomfortable question of all. If the probe was not ignoring us out of arrogance, who exactly was it hiding from? Imagine you are walking through a dense, hostile jungle at night. You are heavily armed. You have advanced night vision optics. You are a highly trained operative. You come across a small clearing in the dense brush. In the absolute center of the clearing, there is a toddler. The toddler is sitting in the dirt, banging 2 rocks together, giggling, making a massive amount of noise. Do you step into the clearing and introduce yourself to the child? No. You freeze. You drop instantly into the shadows. You turn off your radio. You slow your heart rate. You do not look at the toddler. You look at the dark, silent tree line surrounding the clearing. Because if a toddler is making that much noise in a jungle full of apex predators, and it hasn't been eaten yet, it means one of 2 things. Either it is incredibly, mathematically lucky, or it is bait. You do not engage the toddler because you do not want the thing hunting in the dark to notice you standing next to the noise. Humanity is the toddler banging rocks together in the dark. We are blasting high-powered radar into the void. We are launching golden records on the Voyager probes. We are screaming our exact coordinates across the electromagnetic spectrum, begging for someone to come find us. We are incredibly, catastrophically loud. 3i, Atlas passed through our system. It saw the noise. It felt the radio waves of the METI transmission hitting its hull, and its immediate, automated response was to engage maximum thermal stealth, hit the nearest gravitational exit vector, and completely ignore the screaming child. It didn't ignore us because we are beneath its notice. It ignored us because we are a biohazard. We are a loud, vibrating beacon attracting the worst things in the dark. The object did not want to be associated with our location. It did not want its trajectory to be mathematically linked to a star system that is foolishly broadcasting its own existence to the entire local arm of the Milky Way. It treated the solar system exactly the way you would treat an active quarantine zone. You do not wave at the infected patients through the hospital window. You hold your breath, you keep your head down, and you walk as fast as you physically can until you are clear of the contagion. The silence we heard on the Green Bank telescope was not the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of someone actively holding their breath while hiding in the closet. We have spent the last 60 years looking at the quiet sky, convinced that the lack of alien radio signals is a puzzle waiting to be solved. We call it the Fermi paradox. We ask, where is everybody? We assume they are out there, benevolent and wise, waiting for us to reach a certain level of technological maturity before they hand us the keys to the Galactic Federation. We are utterly blind to the reality of the ecosystem. The silence is not a lack of communication. The silence is the communication. In a truly dead universe, things make noise. Stars explode. Black holes tear neutron stars apart. Comets outgas loudly. Asteroids collide and shatter. Chaos is incredibly loud. But in a universe populated by ancient, apex intelligences, the logical endpoint of evolution is not a massive, glowing radio tower. The logical endpoint of evolution is a cloaking device. The smart ones survive by learning how to shut up. The loud ones get systematically scrubbed from the cosmic record. The Green Bank telescope did not record a failure of our technology. It recorded the successful execution of a dominant universal survival strategy. The probe was showing us exactly how to stay alive, simply by refusing to speak. Silence isn't empty. It is an answer. Which brings us to the most terrifying telescope project in human history. We thought looking at one object was bad. Wait until you see what happens when you look at 1,000,000. To understand the absolute terror of the silence, we have to establish the mathematical baseline of what we expected to hear. In 1961, an astronomer named Frank Drake sat down at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory in Green Bank, West Virginia, and wrote out an equation. It was the first serious scientific attempt to estimate how many communicating civilizations might exist in our galaxy right now. The Drake equation is essentially a multiplication table for the cosmos. It takes the average rate of star formation, multiplies it by the fraction of those stars that have planets, the fraction of those planets that sit in the habitable zone, the fraction that develop biological life, the fraction that achieve intelligence, and the fraction that eventually build radio transmitters. The Milky Way galaxy is 100,000 light-years across. It contains an estimated 100 to 400 billion stars. Even if you plug the most incredibly pessimistic variables into the Drake equation, even if you assume that biological life is a freak, near-impossible accident, and that technological intelligence is a 1 in a trillion lottery ticket, the sheer mathematical volume of the galaxy dictates that we should not be alone. The numbers guarantee that there should be at least a few dozen, if not thousands, of active, communicating civilizations scattered across our local cosmic neighborhood. We expected the sky to be a crowded city. We expected to point our instruments at the dark and see the cosmic equivalent of light pollution. When a civilization reaches a certain level of technological maturity, they alter their environment. They build massive orbital infrastructure. They capture the energy of their host star using Dyson swarms. They generate colossal amounts of infrared waste heat. They pollute their planetary atmospheres with heavy metals, industrial chlorofluorocarbons, and synthetic isotopes. And most importantly, they bleed electromagnetic radiation. The collective radio chatter of billions of communication arrays should leak out into the interstellar medium like a beacon. Life is messy. Intelligence is even messier. The universe should be incredibly loud. So, we built the ultimate listening device. The Breakthrough Listen project, launched with hundreds of millions of dollars in funding, represents the most comprehensive, exhaustive search for extraterrestrial intelligence in the history of human civilization. It utilized the most powerful radio telescopes on the planet, the Green Bank telescope in West Virginia, the Parkes Observatory in Australia, and the Meerkat Array in South Africa. They did not just point the dishes at random patches of empty space. They targeted 1,327 specific, high-probability star systems within our immediate galactic vicinity. They scanned billions of radio channels simultaneously. They looked for narrowband signals, which do not occur in nature. They looked for the concentrated bursts of optical lasers. They measured the light curves of stars, searching for the microscopic dimming that would indicate an artificial megastructure orbiting a distant sun. They processed petabytes of raw telemetry using advanced machine learning algorithms specifically designed to filter out the natural, chaotic static of the universe and isolate the mathematical geometry of an artificial mind. In 2024, the Breakthrough Listen team published the results of this massive, unprecedented dragnet. We fed the most robust mathematical models of alien biology into the most powerful sensory apparatus ever constructed by human hands. Here is the data. The final, scientifically verified number of detected technosignatures across all 1,327 star systems across billions of radio frequencies. 0.000%. Nothing. The math doesn't add up. The Drake equation mathematically guarantees thousands of civilizations. The telescope data gives us an absolute freezing vacuum. In astrophysics, this staggering discrepancy is often explained away by a theoretical concept called the Great Filter. The idea is that there is some evolutionary bottleneck, some developmental hurdle in the universe that is so incredibly difficult to pass that almost no civilization survives it. The scientific community comforts itself by assuming the Great Filter is a historical event. They theorize that the hardest part is the jump from single-celled organisms to multicellular life. Or perhaps the filter is the discovery of nuclear weapons, and civilizations simply blow themselves up before they can colonize the stars. We tell ourselves that the filter is just a tragic, natural side effect of evolution. The 2024 Breakthrough Listen data suggests something entirely different, and far worse. Think about the concept of cleanliness in the natural world. Nature is not clean. Nature is profoundly, inherently chaotic. If you walk into a pristine, ancient forest, you do not find perfectly swept dirt paths. You find decaying logs. You find the skeletal remains of animals that died thousands of years ago, slowly calcifying into the soil. You find broken branches, shed skin, and the overwhelming, tangled mess of biological competition. A healthy ecosystem is a massive cemetery of evidence. You can track the entire history of the forest simply by digging your hands into the dirt and reading the layers of the dead. The cosmos should be exactly the same. Even if a civilization goes extinct, even if they destroy themselves in a planetary nuclear war, or exhaust their atmospheric resources, or are wiped out by a rogue asteroid, they should leave a corpse. They should leave artificial satellites drifting silently around their dead world. They should leave the decaying, shattered husks of solar collectors. They should leave atmospheric signatures of unnatural isotopes, like plutonium-244, which takes millions of years to decay. Their early radio waves should still be rippling outward through the interstellar medium, a ghostly transmission echoing in the dark long after the speakers have turned to dust. If thousands of civilizations have risen and fallen in the Milky Way over the last 10 billion years, the galaxy should be a massive, cluttered graveyard. We should be tripping over the archaeological ruins of dead gods every single time we point a telescope at the sky. We should be detecting the radioactive ash of ancient wars. But the Breakthrough Listen project found nothing. No ruins, no ghosts, no debris. The crime scene hasn't just been abandoned, it has been scrubbed. Imagine you are a homicide detective. You are called to a house where a violent struggle supposedly took place. The neighbors heard screaming. The windows are shattered from the inside. You know, fundamentally, that something terrible happened in this room. But when you step through the front door, the house is completely immaculate. The hardwood floors have been aggressively bleached. The walls have been freshly painted perfectly white. There is not a single drop of blood, not a single fingerprint, not a single microscopic strand of DNA anywhere to be found. The air smells strongly of industrial ammonia. Perfect cleanliness in nature is unnatural. It takes an immense amount of deliberate, calculated effort to erase a footprint. It takes active energy to bleach a crime scene. The absence of evidence, in this specific case, is the most terrifying evidence of all, because dirt settles naturally, but bleach is applied manually. If the galaxy is a graveyard, someone is actively removing the headstones. The Great Filter is not a historical, evolutionary bottleneck that civilizations accidentally fail. It is an active, ongoing deletion process. The sky has been sterilized, and it is being maintained in a state of absolute, artificial sterilization by a system that leaves no physical trace of its own existence. You have to ask yourself a very simple, very cold question. If the entire local arm of the Milky Way has been meticulously scrubbed clean of any loud, energy-consuming civilizations, when we look at the breakthrough listen data, we are forced to abandon the comfortable idea of natural extinction. A natural extinction is a dying star. It is a slow, freezing death as an atmosphere bleeds out into space. A natural extinction leaves a corpse. But the absolute zero result of our radio sweeps implies a systemic, highly efficient protocol of eradication. It implies that the moment a biological species becomes technologically capable of making a noise, something in the dark hears that noise, calculates the coordinates, and initiates a localized deletion. We call this the dark forest theory. But the academic name strips away the visceral, suffocating horror of what it actually means to live inside it. Forget the mathematics for a moment. Forget the telescopes. Imagine you are trapped inside a massive, pitch-black warehouse. The power has been cut, the windows are sealed, there is no light. You are completely blind. You know, with absolute certainty, that you are not alone in this warehouse. There are other people trapped in here with you. You can hear the faint, microscopic shifting of weight on the concrete floor. You can feel the displacement of the air. You also know that every single person in this dark room is armed with a lethal weapon. You do not know their intentions. You do not know their moral compass. You do not know if they are benevolent or completely psychotic. In this environment, what is the mathematically dominant strategy for survival? If you speak, if you light a match to see their faces, you reveal your exact coordinates. You instantly become a known variable in an unknown room. If you say hello, you might be speaking to a friend, or you might be speaking to a terrified person holding a loaded gun, who immediately fires at the source of the noise simply out of primal panic. You cannot risk the calculation. The cost of being wrong is absolute zero. It is death. Therefore, the only logical, mathematically sound decision you can make in the dark warehouse is to remain perfectly silent. You control your breathing. You take your shoes off so your footsteps do not echo. You press your back against the cold concrete wall, and you hold your weapon tightly against your chest. Every other intelligent person in the room makes the exact same calculation. The result is a room full of heavily armed, terrified individuals, all standing in pitch blackness, all holding their breath, creating an environment of absolute, deafening silence. But the horror of the dark forest does not stop at silence. It escalates. What happens when someone in the room makes a mistake? What happens when an arrogant, foolish person decides they want to make friends and they turn on a flashlight? The moment that light flickers on, every single person in the room sees them. The fool with the flashlight does not just expose themselves, they become a threat to the safety of everyone else. Because the light might eventually sweep across the room and expose your position, you cannot allow the light to keep shining. You cannot wait to see what the fool does next. The dominant survival strategy dictates that you must extinguish the light immediately from the shadows before it sweeps over you. You don't talk to them, you don't negotiate, you pull the trigger. Humanity is the fool with the flashlight. We are the ones turning on the radio beacons. We are the ones broadcasting our location. We look at the 1,327 silent star systems surveyed by the Breakthrough Listen project, and we think we are looking at an empty warehouse. We are not. We are looking at a warehouse full of snipers. The sky is completely silent, Because the moment a civilization reaches the technological capacity to broadcast radio waves, they cross a threshold. They become a detectable variable in the dark forest. And the ancient, apex civilizations that have survived for billions of years did not survive by being friendly. They survived by systematically eliminating any potential threat before it had the chance to develop into a rival. How do you delete a civilization across the vastness of space? You do not use massive, glowing armadas of laser-firing spaceships. That is a human fantasy. That requires exposing your own position. You use physics. You calculate the coordinates of the radio transmission. You take a massive, dense slug of iron or osmium. You strap a non-gravitational drive to it, and you accelerate it to 99.9% the speed of light. We call this a relativistic kill vehicle. It is the ultimate expression of the bleach. A mass moving at relativistic speeds does not need an explosive warhead. The kinetic energy alone is enough to shatter a planetary crust. Because it is moving just a fraction below the speed of light, the light of its approach cannot reach the target fast enough to provide a warning. By the time the astronomers on the doomed planet see the flash of the engine, the slug has already struck the atmosphere. There is no alarm, there is no evacuation. There is just the mundane reality of a Tuesday afternoon, followed instantly by the total liquefaction of the biosphere. It is clean, it is cold, it is completely anonymous. The attacker never reveals their location. The threat is neutralized. The silence is restored. This is the architecture of the graveyard we live in. The Breakthrough Listen project did not fail to find life. It succeeded in documenting the aftermath of an automated, galactic-scale culling protocol. We listened to the exact star systems where life should have flourished, and we heard the perfect, terrifying silence of a freshly bleached crime scene. We are staring at the aftermath of thousands of preemptive strikes. We have this deeply naive, deeply biological presumption that intelligence trends toward empathy. We assume that a civilization capable of mastering the fundamental forces of the universe must also have mastered its own aggression. We believe that technology brings enlightenment. We think that if you can build a Dyson sphere, you must automatically be a philosopher. But the data from the dark forest suggests the exact opposite. Intelligence does not breed empathy. Intelligence breeds paranoia. The smarter you become, the more accurately you can calculate the mathematical probability of your own destruction. The more advanced your technology becomes, the more you realize how terrifyingly easy it is to completely annihilate a planet from 10 light-years away. Paranoia is not a psychological defect in the cosmos. Paranoia is a physical law. It is the filter itself. The civilizations that survived are not the philosophers. They are not the artists. They are not the ones who built massive radio dishes to say hello to the void. The civilizations that survived are the ones that mastered active stealth. They are the ones that learned how to swallow their own thermal exhaust. They are the ones that map the gravity wells of neighboring systems without ever emitting a single photon of waste heat. They are the architects of the probes like 3I, Atlas. They are the ones holding the bleach, and they are currently running a grid search through our living room. We are sitting here, broadcasting our television shows, our military radar, and our localized radio chatter out into an environment governed by absolute, uncompromising lethality. We are walking through the killing fields wearing high-visibility jackets, wondering why we can't find anyone else to play with. We think the fact that we haven't been struck yet means we are safe. We think it means the universe is empty. It doesn't mean we are safe. It just means the light of our flashlight hasn't reached the wrong set of eyes yet. Our earliest radio broadcasts are only about 100 light-years out. The Milky Way is 100,000 light-years across. We are a localized, rapidly expanding bubble of noise in a remarkably quiet sector. But the bubble is growing. Every single day, the sphere of our electromagnetic pollution expands by another light day. It is washing over new star systems. It is brushing against the dark, frozen corners of the Oort clouds of alien suns. We are inevitably, mathematically destined to touch a tripwire. Perhaps we already did. Perhaps the 2017 Tromsø transmission to Luton's star was the trigger. Perhaps 3I, Atlas, was not just a surveyor. Perhaps it was a targeting laser, verifying the coordinates of the noise anomaly before sending a microscopic, encrypted pulse back to an automated launch facility buried in the ice of a rogue planet. We look up at the night sky and we marvel at the peace of it. We write poetry about the twinkling stars. We feel a profound, spiritual connection to the quiet majesty of the cosmos. But you cannot look at the sky the same way once you understand the mathematics of the Breakthrough Listen project. The peace is a deception. The quiet is not the peaceful sleep of a benevolent universe. The quiet is the taut, suffocating tension of a sniper holding their breath before the trigger is pulled. The stars are quiet because the loud ones are dead. Which brings us to the exit vector of 3I, Atlas. Where exactly is a stealth object running to? When an object leaves the solar system, it does not simply vanish into the ether. It possesses a vector, a mathematical arrow drawn from the center of our sun, passing through the exact coordinates of its exit point, pointing endlessly into the deep field of the cosmos. Astronomers at the Keck Observatory in Hawaii mapped this arrow using complex orbital mechanics and parallax measurements. They expected the arrow to point toward a logical destination. The Alpha Centauri system is 4.24 light-years away. It is the closest harbor in the interstellar ocean. It is the obvious, mathematically efficient trajectory for any exploratory probe. We assumed 3I. Atlas was moving from one star to the next, mapping the local stellar neighborhood, jumping between gravity wells like stones across a river. The orbital telemetry proved us completely wrong. The exit vector of 3I, Atlas, does not point at Alpha Centauri. It does not point at Sirius, or Proxima Centauri, or any star system in the Orion Cygnus arm of the Milky Way. It is not aiming at a star at all. It is pointing directly at an anomaly known as the Boötes Void. To understand the sheer terror of the Boötes Void, you have to understand the macro-architecture of the universe. The cosmos is not a uniform soup of evenly spaced galaxies. It is structured like a massive, three-dimensional sponge. There are incredibly dense filaments of dark matter pulling millions of galaxies together into glowing, supermassive walls of light. And between these walls, there are voids, pockets of absolute, terrifying nothingness. The Boötes Void is the largest of these empty spaces ever discovered. It is a spherical expanse of absolute nothingness, approximately 330 million light-years in diameter. It is so unimaginably vast that if you placed the Milky Way galaxy in the dead center of the Boötes Void, human beings would not have known that other galaxies existed until the invention of deep space radio telescopes in the 1960s. We would have looked up at the night sky, seen our own local stars, and assumed the rest of the universe was a completely, permanently empty black canvas. The void contains almost no matter. It contains almost no light. The ambient temperature of this specific region of space is exactly 2.7 Kelvin. It is the baseline freezing temperature of the cosmic microwave background radiation. It is the closest thing in physical reality to absolute zero. Here is the problem. This trajectory violates the core, fundamental principle of technological evolution. The Kardashev scale is our primary model for advanced civilizations. It dictates that advanced intelligence requires energy. To run complex atmospheric simulations, to power interstellar infrastructure, to survive the brutal, decaying entropy of the universe, you need heat. You need radiation. You need the nuclear furnace of a star. The model assumes that an apex civilization builds Dyson spheres to capture every photon of their sun. They harvest plasma. They conquer the glowing, radiation-rich centers of galaxies. They move toward the light. 3i, Atlas is doing the exact opposite. It is running away from the light. It is deliberately slingshotting away from matter. It is diving perfectly straight into the coldest, darkest, most barren desert in the known universe. The thermodynamic models shatter right here. An apex intelligence does not abandon the infinite, glowing energy of a star system to freeze in the dark. It is fundamentally counterintuitive. It is a deliberate starvation. Why would a highly advanced piece of technology seek out absolute zero? Think about how you behave when you are being hunted. Imagine you are a fugitive. You have committed a crime against a massive, global regime that possesses infinite resources. They have surveillance drones in the sky. They have facial recognition software, scanning every street corner. They are sweeping the metropolis, looking for your specific biometric signature. You are currently standing in the middle of a massive, glowing, hypermodern city. There is infinite food in this city. There is warmth. There is electricity. There are millions of people to interact with. Do you stay in the penthouse apartment? Do you go to the brightest, most comfortable room available to you? No, you do not, because the light makes you visible. The heat of the penthouse apartment makes you a glowing target on the thermal cameras. The energy of the city is exactly what the hunters use to track you. The comfort of the environment is the trap. So you leave the glowing city. You descend. You find the oldest, most abandoned industrial building on the absolute edge of the power grid. You break the heavy padlock on the basement door. You climb down into a concrete sublevel that has been flooded with freezing water for 30 years. There is no light. There is no heat. The temperature is hovering just a fraction of a degree above freezing. You submerge your body in the dark water. You slow your breathing. You drop your heart rate to an absolute minimum. You deliberately allow your core body temperature to plummet until you are hypothermic. You are not exploring the basement. You are not thriving. You are inducing a state of near death. You are freezing yourself so that your physical signature merges perfectly with the concrete and the water. You are waiting for the heat to pass. In astrophysics, this nightmare is called the aestivation hypothesis. Aestivation is the biological opposite of hibernation. Animals on Earth hibernate to survive the freezing cold of winter. But aestivation is a state of deep metabolic paralysis induced by organisms to survive extreme heat. Lungfish bury themselves in the mud and stop breathing when the lakes dry up under the summer sun. They wait in the dark dirt for the rain to return. The scientific community has always assumed that the universe is currently in its prime. We look through our telescopes at the glowing galaxies, the violent birth of new stars in the Orion Nebula, and we think this is the perfect time to be alive. We think the universe is at a comfortable, highly active temperature for a civilization to conquer and colonize. We are entirely wrong. To an ancient, hyper-advanced, machine-based intelligence, the current universe is a burning, uninhabitable furnace. Let's strip away the biology and look at the cold, hard physics of computation. Any civilization that survives long enough eventually transcends its biological origins. Flesh is weak. Flesh requires water, atmospheric pressure, and incredibly fragile chemical balances. True, eternal intelligence is algorithmic. It is housed in massive, planetary-sized supercomputers, but computation is bound by a strict, unbreakable, physical law known as Landauer's principle. Landauer's principle states that every single time a computer processes a bit of information, every time it calculates a variable or erases a single line of code, it generates a microscopic, unavoidable amount of physical heat. You feel a primitive version of this when your laptop burns your skin after running a heavy software program. In a hot environment, a massive supercomputer must expend terrifying amounts of energy just to cool its own processes down. If the ambient temperature of the universe is too high, your processing power is fundamentally capped by thermodynamics. You hit a thermal wall. You cannot think faster without melting your own hardware into slag. The Boötes Void is 2.7 Kelvin. If you take a galactic-scale supercomputer and you drag it into the deepest, darkest, coldest part of the Boötes Void, you fundamentally change the mathematics of Landauer's principle. In an environment that cold, the physical efficiency of computation skyrockets by a factor of 10 to the power of 30. You can process infinite information, simulate entire artificial universes, and run godlike algorithms with almost zero thermal resistance. But 2.7 Kelvin is still not cold enough for the architects of 3I. Atlas. The universe is expanding, and as it expands, the ambient radiation thins out. It cools down. Trillions of years from now, the stars will burn through their fuel. The galaxies will go dark. The ambient temperature of the entire cosmos will drop from 2.7 Kelvin down to an infinitesimal fraction above absolute zero. That is the true target temperature. The 3I Atlas probe is not traveling to the Boötes Void to explore. The architects of this network are not hiding from a physical predator. They are hiding from the ambient heat of the current cosmological epoch. They have calculated the exact mathematical timeline of the death of the universe. They have realized that the most efficient time to exist, the only time when they can achieve infinite computation, is when everything else is completely dead. So they packed up their servers. They abandoned the warm, glowing galaxies. They flew their infrastructure deep into the absolute darkest, emptiest void they could find. And they shut themselves down. They are aestivating. They have put themselves into a deep, freezing machine sleep. They are hovering in the dark of the Boötes Void, barely maintaining power, silently calculating the microscopic drop in the background radiation over billions of years. They are waiting for the universe to die so they can wake up. Imagine the sheer arrogance, the absolute terrifying patience of an intelligence that looks at the 14-billion-year-old universe, looks at the violent birth and eventual death of our sun, looks at the entirety of human history, and decides that all of it is just an annoying, uncomfortably hot summer afternoon. They are waiting in the basement. They are in the frozen water. But here is the detail that will keep you awake at night. If the apex predators of the cosmos have put themselves to sleep in the Boötes Void, waiting for the universe to freeze over, why are they still sending out automated, actively maneuvering probes like 3I, Atlas, to map our solar system? A sleeping giant does not need to run a grid search on the anthills outside its cave. You do not set an active alarm system unless you are fundamentally terrified of what might happen while you sleep. To understand the absolute, suffocating dread of the aestivation hypothesis, you have to look at the universe from the perspective of an entity that requires absolute zero to survive. To these aestivating intelligences, the universe is not a canvas for biological life to paint its history on. The universe is a physical thermostat, and they need that thermostat to drop. They need the stars to burn out. They need the galaxies to drift apart. They are patiently waiting for the natural, unavoidable entropy of the cosmos to create the perfect, freezing dark necessary for infinite computation. Now, introduce a biological variable into that calculation. Introduce humanity. We look at our technological trajectory with immense pride. We measure our progress as a species by how much raw energy we can consume. 100 years ago, we burned coal to power our primitive steam engines. Today, we split the atom. We harness nuclear fission. We are desperately trying to crack the code of nuclear fusion so we can build miniature suns in our laboratories. We dream of the day when we can leave this planet, expand across the solar system, and eventually build Dyson swarms, massive, planet-sized arrays of solar collectors designed to completely enclose our sun and harvest every single photon of its energy. We view the Kardashev scale as a ladder of ascension. We believe that becoming a Type 2 civilization, a civilization capable of consuming the entire energy output of a star, is our ultimate evolutionary destiny. We do not realize that we are actively threatening the sleep of the gods. If a biological civilization like ours is allowed to expand unchecked, we will not just consume our sun, we will consume the neighboring stars. We will spread across the Orion Cygnus arm like a virus. We will build massive, glowing megastructures that generate terrifying amounts of infrared waste heat. We will fundamentally alter the thermodynamic equilibrium of the local galaxy. If thousands of civilizations across the universe do the exact same thing, the universe will never cool down. We will keep the cosmos artificially warm with the friction of our endless, chaotic industry. We will permanently pollute the perfect, freezing vacuum with our industrial exhaust. We are not just a noisy toddler in the dark forest. We are a biological space heater placed directly inside the freezing server room of an aestivating god. And you do not let a space heater run inside a server room. You unplug it. This is the true, terrifying purpose of the 3I Atlas probe. It is not a scientific explorer. It is an automated environmental smoke detector. When a highly paranoid, apex intelligence goes into a vulnerable state of deep hibernation, it does not leave its perimeter undefended. It builds an autonomous, self-replicating network of sensor drones. It drops them from the local standard of rest. It programs them to silently thread the gravity wells of billions of star systems, checking the thermodynamic baseline of every single planet capable of supporting life. The probe did not ignore our radio signals because it was arrogant. It ignored our radio signals because it was running a specific, hard-coded diagnostic on our star system. And radio waves do not trigger the primary alarm. Radio waves are just biological noise. Radio waves do not alter the temperature of the galactic sector. The probe was looking for waste heat. It was scanning the solar system for the early, telltale infrared signatures of stellar-scale engineering. It was measuring the exact energy output of the Earth to see if we had crossed the mathematical threshold from a primitive, localized annoyance into a legitimate thermodynamic threat. It threaded the Jupiter saddle point, absorbed our radio transmissions, ran the calculation, and determined that we are not yet capable of keeping the universe warm. We are still just burning dead dinosaurs in our atmosphere. We are still mathematically insignificant. So the drone completed its sweep, engaged its thermal camouflage to avoid any unnecessary friction, and slingshotted out of the system, pointing its telemetry laser directly back into the freezing abyss of the Boötes Void. It reported back to the sleeping network that Sector 7G is currently below the threat threshold. We survived the encounter not because we are special and not because we are hidden. We survived simply because we are still too primitive to warrant the expenditure of a relativistic kill vehicle. We are a weed that hasn't grown tall enough for the lawnmower to hit it yet. Think about the impossible, suffocating paradox this traps us in. Every single human instinct, every single evolutionary drive we possess, demands that we expand. We have to innovate. We have to consume more energy. If we stay on this planet, if we remain a Type 0 civilization burning fossil fuels, we are mathematically guaranteed to go extinct. A localized gamma ray burst, a massive asteroid impact, or the inevitable expansion of our own sun will eventually boil the oceans and wipe us out. To survive the natural hostility of the universe, we absolutely must advance. We must build the megastructures. We must conquer the gravity of other worlds. But the very act of advancing is exactly what triggers the alarm. The moment we successfully build a Dyson swarm, the moment we alter the infrared signature of our solar system enough to register on the telemetry of the next automated probe that drops from the local standard of rest, the diagnostic will change. The algorithm will flip from a 0 to a 1. The weed will have grown too tall, and the automated defense network of the estivating gods will initiate the Bleach Protocol. We are trapped in a cosmological lose-lose scenario. We are damned to a natural death if we stay in the cradle, and we are guaranteed an artificial execution if we try to crawl out of it. We look at our rapid technological acceleration, and we applaud ourselves. We give out Nobel Prizes. We celebrate the engineers and the physicists who push the boundaries of quantum mechanics and nuclear energy. We think we are unlocking the secrets of reality. We do not understand that we are just a rat in a basement, slowly chewing our way through a power cable, entirely unaware of the massive, lethal shock that is waiting for us the moment our teeth touch the copper wire. The architects in the Boötes Void are not malicious. They do not hate us. They do not even know our name. They simply wrote an absolute, unbending physical law into the operating system of the galaxy millions of years ago. Do not let the biologicals turn up the thermostat. When you stare into the dark of the night sky, you are not looking at a frontier waiting to be conquered. You are looking at a perfectly maintained, heavily armed temperature control system. And we are currently burning just cold enough to be temporarily tolerated. They are not traveling. They are surviving. And if the architects of the cosmos are hiding in the dark, what exactly is terrifying them? What if they are the ones who wrote them? In April 2026, astrophysicists turned the Fermi Gamma Ray Space Telescope toward the exit corridor of the 3I Atlas probe. Fermi is an instrument designed to look at the most violent, high-energy events in the cosmos. It monitors the sky for gamma-ray bursts, the blinding flashes of light created when neutron stars collide, or supermassive black holes devour matter. The researchers were not expecting to see a gamma-ray burst from a stealth probe. They were looking for an exhaust plume. They hypothesized that to cross the massive, staggering distance of the Boötes Void, the object would eventually have to drop its thermal camouflage and ignite a hyper-advanced propulsion system. They pointed Fermi into the dark, looking for the microscopic high-energy flash of an engine burn. They did not find an engine burn. They found a structural failure in the universe itself. To understand the sheer ontological terror of this data, you have to understand the absolute foundation of modern physics. It is a concept called Lorentz invariance. It is the cornerstone of Albert Einstein's theory of special relativity. Lorentz invariance dictates a very simple, unbending rule. The laws of physics are exactly the same for all observers, regardless of where they are, what direction they are facing, or how fast they are moving. It means that empty space has no preferred direction. It means that the speed of light in a vacuum is an absolute constant. Lorentz invariance is not just a theory. It is the bedrock of reality. It is the mathematical guarantee that space is a smooth, continuous, unbroken fabric. Space is the canvas on which all of physical reality is painted. You can warp this canvas with extreme gravity. A massive object like a black hole or a gas giant bends the fabric, creating the orbital trajectories we observe. But you cannot tear the canvas. You cannot break the symmetry of space-time. If Lorentz invariance falls apart, even on a microscopic scale, then the entire model of a physical universe collapses. The Fermi telescope analyzed the exact geometric wake of 3I Atlas as it exited the solar system. It detected a microscopic breakdown in Lorentz invariance. Right along the exact flight path of the probe, the symmetry of space-time failed. The high-energy photons of the background radiation passing through the object's wake were arriving at the Fermi sensors with a staggered, mathematically impossible delay. The speed of light in that specific, microscopic corridor was no longer a constant. The smooth, continuous fabric of the vacuum had been fractured. Objects moving through space displace matter. A nuclear submarine moving through the ocean displaces water. A stealth bomber moving through the sky displaces the atmosphere. They push the physical medium out of the way to move forward. But you do not displace space-time. Space-time is not a fluid. It is not a gas. It is the metric of reality itself. A submarine cannot push the fundamental concept of distance out of the way. The data from the Fermi telescope implies something impossible. 3I, Atlas is not flying through space. It is not using thrusters. It is not using solar sails. It is actively exploiting microscopic, pixel-level cracks in the vacuum to move. The physical laws are bending around it. It is passing through the exact coordinates where the mathematical symmetry of the universe breaks down. It is not traveling. It is clipping through the environment. The astrophysicists looking at this telemetry are terrified because they understand the mechanical implications. If Lorentz invariance is broken, if the speed of light can fluctuate in the wake of an artificial object, then space is not a smooth, continuous canvas. Space is quantized. It is pixelated. It is made of discrete, microscopic blocks of data. And 3I, Atlas knows exactly where the seams between the pixels are located. Let's strip away the quantum mechanics and the relativity. Let's look at this anomaly through the lens of an engineer. Imagine you are wearing a highly advanced virtual reality headset. You are fully immersed in a complex, beautifully rendered digital video game. The physics engine in this game is perfect. When your digital avatar picks up a digital apple and drops it, it falls to the ground at exactly 9.8 meters per second squared. The gravity feels real. When you walk your avatar into a digital brick wall, you stop instantly. The collision detection software registers the impact. The wall feels completely solid. You cannot walk through it. Your brain accepts the simulation as absolute physical reality. You are bound by the coded rules of the environment. Now, imagine you are standing in this virtual city, and you notice another character moving differently. This character does not walk around the solid brick walls. They do not climb over the digital fences. They do not obey the gravity engine. Instead, they walk directly up to a solid wall, perfectly align their digital body with a microscopic, invisible seam in the game's rendering geometry, and simply step right through the bricks. They did not break the wall. They did not use an explosive to destroy it. They did not exert any physical force. They simply exploited a mathematical rounding error in the collision detection software. They found a flaw in the code that governs the concept of solid matter, and they slipped between the lines of data. To you, trapped inside the physics engine, their movement looks like magic. It looks like a violation of reality. But to the character stepping through the wall, it isn't magic at all. It is just debugging. This is exactly what the Fermi data implies about the movement of 3I Atlas. It is not a physical ship flying through a physical universe. It is a cursor dragging across a screen. It is finding the microscopic rendering flaws in the fabric of spacetime, the quantum pixels, where the code of Lorentz invariance is weak, and it is slipping through them to bypass the speed of light entirely. Think about the horrifying ontological cascade this triggers. If an object can exploit the pixelated seams of the universe to bypass physical laws, it forces you to completely redefine what the universe actually is. We believe we live in a physical place. You believe in the solidity of the chair you are sitting on. You believe in the absolute reality of the distance between your eyes and the screen you are reading. You believe that the stars in the night sky are massive, physical furnaces of hydrogen plasma burning billions of light years away. But if space-time is pixelated, and if an automated drone can exploit those pixels to clip through the environment, let's strip away the romance of astrophysics. Let's discard the biological comfort of feeling the wind on your skin or the warmth of the sun on your face. We need to look at this through the cold, entirely detached lens of a systems engineer. There is a concept in cognitive science and quantum mechanics called the interface theory of perception. It proposes a horrifyingly simple idea. Human beings do not see the truth of reality. We do not see the underlying physics. Evolution did not wire our brains to perceive the absolute truth, because the absolute truth is too complex to survive. Instead, evolution wired our brains to perceive a highly simplified, perfectly curated, graphical user interface. Think about the desktop monitor on your personal computer. When you want to delete a document, you use your mouse to click on a small blue folder icon. You drag that blue folder icon across the screen, and you drop it into a small icon shaped like a metal trash can. You hear a pre-recorded crumpling sound. The folder disappears. You understand this interaction perfectly. But ask yourself, is there a physical blue folder inside the plastic casing of your monitor? Is there a physical metal trash can sitting on your motherboard? No. There is absolutely nothing physical about those objects. They are illusions. They are glowing pixels generated by the graphical user interface. The UI is specifically designed to hide the staggering, incomprehensible complexity of the reality beneath it. It hides the billions of lines of binary code, the microscopic transistors flipping on and off billions of times a second, the complex electrical voltages routing through the silicon. It hides the truth so that you, the biological user, can function without your brain crashing from sensory overload. If you had to read binary code just to send an email, you would go insane. The interface theory dictates that the entire physical universe you interact with is just a desktop. We see a tree, we see a rock, we see a star burning in the night sky. We think they are solid objects. They are not. They are just the blue folder icons on the desktop of the cosmos. We are biological users, trapped entirely within the graphical user interface. We are strictly bound by the rules of this interface. You cannot reach into your monitor and pull the blue folder out into your physical room. You cannot travel faster than the speed of light because the software does not allow the user avatar to perform that action. The collision detection software prevents you from walking through a brick wall. The gravity engine keeps your avatar pinned to the digital floor. But 3i, Atlas is not a user. 3i, Atlas is a command line execution. It is an administrator-level diagnostic tool running in the background. It does not interact with the blue folders. It does not see a physical gas giant named Jupiter. It sees the underlying mathematical variable of gravitational curvature. It does not see the speed of light as a physical, insurmountable barrier. It sees the speed of light as a localized rendering constraint for the biological avatars, and it simply alters the code to bypass it. This is why the Fermi Gamma-Ray Space Telescope detected the fracture in Lorentz invariance. We caught a glimpse of the command line. For a microscopic fraction of a second, the graphical user interface crashed in the exact physical wake of the probe, and our sensors recorded the raw, terrifying pixels of the simulation beneath the fabric of space. Think about the staggering, existential weight of this realization. We have spent thousands of years building religions, writing complex philosophies, and constructing massive particle accelerators to understand the fundamental nature of our reality. We smash protons together at the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, desperately trying to find the smallest, most indivisible building block of physical matter. We think we are peeling back the layers of an infinite onion. We think that if we just build a bigger microscope, if we just fund a more powerful telescope, we will finally see the absolute truth of existence. But if the interface theory is correct, building a bigger microscope is completely, tragically pointless. If you take a magnifying glass and hold it up to your computer monitor, you do not see the binary code. You do not see the software architecture. You do not see the silicon motherboard. You just see smaller pixels. You are still looking at the screen. You are never looking at the machine. Physics is just the study of the pixels. Astrophysics is just the measurement of the screen resolution. We are measuring the boundaries of our own digital cage, congratulating ourselves for understanding how the collision detection software works. We give Nobel Prizes to the researchers who accurately map the loading zones of the galaxy. We are localized rendered entities inside a massive engine, writing highly complex academic papers about how the digital wind blows through the digital trees. And while we are busy measuring the pixels, the architects of this system are moving freely through the command line, entirely unbound by the physics they programmed for us to obey. This single realization reframes the entire sequence of anomalies. It takes the broken data and completely explains it. Why did Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3I, Atlas, all drop from the exact coordinates of the local standard of rest? Because the LSR is not just a kinematic baseline. It is the default spawn point. It is the zero coordinate of the simulation grid, where new administrative assets are loaded into the environment. Why are there no other communicating civilizations in the 1,327 star systems scanned by the Breakthrough Listen project? Because the server is dynamically allocating its processing resources. It systematically deletes the rendered entities when they start consuming too much computational power. The Dark Forest is not a physical war zone of alien empires fighting for resources. It is an automated garbage collection algorithm. It is the operating system freeing up RAM. Why are the Apex intelligences activating in the freezing, absolute nothingness of the Boötes Void? Because the Boötes Void is not a physical desert. It is the physical location of the hardware. They are not hiding inside the simulation. They are the substrate. They are utilizing the 2.7 Kelvin temperature of the void to keep the quantum processes from melting down while they run the simulation we call the universe. When you truly internalize this, the physical dread evaporates. The primal, biological fear of an alien invasion disappears. The fear of a relativistic kill vehicle striking the Earth feels almost quaint. It feels almost comforting. Because a kinetic strike from a massive piece of osmium is a physical event. It is something that happens within the safe, familiar bounds of physical reality. You can understand a rock hitting a planet. The fear you are left with is infinitely worse. It is the ontological horror of absolute unreality. It is the realization that your consciousness, your deeply held memories, your grief, your physical pain, and your loves are nothing more than localized processing loops. It is the realization that the stars you look up at when you feel lonely are just high-resolution background textures painted on the inside of a boundary wall you are not allowed to cross. You are the bird printed on a credit card, flat, two-dimensional, dreaming you are solid, dreaming you can fly. You don't break the rules if you wrote the code, which leaves us with a singular, unavoidable problem. We have established the terrifying parameters of the environment we live in. We have looked at the absolute, freezing zero of the Boötes Void. We have examined the microscopic, pixelated fractures in the wake of 3I, Atlas. We have seen the perfectly bleached, empty crime scene of the Milky Way, wiped clean of any communicating intelligence by the relentless execution of the Dark Forest Protocol. We have painted a picture of a universe that is completely, fundamentally hostile to loud, warm, biological life. But you are still sitting here. You are breathing. You are processing information. You are a biological entity reading these words. In cosmology, we have two competing philosophies that attempt to explain why human beings exist. The first is the Copernican principle. It is the bedrock of modern astronomy. The Copernican principle dictates that we are not special. The Earth is not the center of the solar system. The Sun is not the center of the galaxy. Our galaxy is just one of 2 trillion galaxies drifting in the void. We are a painfully average, completely mundane byproduct of natural chemical reactions. We are the rule, not the exception. The second philosophy is the anthropic principle. It states that the universe must possess the exact, hyperspecific physical properties necessary to allow for the creation of conscious observers, simply because if it didn't, we wouldn't be here to observe it. It implies that the sheer, staggering improbability of our existence is the only reason we are capable of measuring the universe at all. For decades, the Copernican principle felt safe. It felt correct. But the data we have accumulated from the Breakthrough Listen project, the orbital telemetry of the stealth probes, and the absolute silence of the radio spectrum completely shatters the Copernican model. We are not average. We are the only thing making a sound. Let's look at the physical reality of the human body. Look at your brain. The human brain is the most complex, chaotic, energetically expensive arrangement of matter we have ever discovered. It contains 86 billion neurons. It operates via 100 trillion synaptic connections, firing constantly, flipping microscopic electrical switches to generate the illusion of consciousness. To maintain this staggering level of complexity, your brain requires absolute, uncompromising thermal stability. It operates at exactly 37 degrees Celsius. It consumes roughly 20 watts of power, drawing a massive 20% of your body's total energy budget just to keep the lights on in your skull. In the language of thermodynamics, biological life is an entropy engine. We take in highly ordered energy in the form of sunlight and organic food, and we expel highly disordered energy in the form of physical waste and thermal exhaust. We are actively, aggressively warming up our immediate environment. Now, zoom out. Look at the entire human species. 8 billion localized entropy engines clustered together on the surface of a wet rock. We dig up billions of tons of fossilized carbon and set it on fire. We split uranium atoms to boil water. We blast the electromagnetic spectrum with millions of watts of radio frequency, television broadcasts, and military radar. We wrap our entire planet in a glowing, buzzing, artificially heated layer of industrial noise. In the context of a universe where the baseline temperature is 2.7 Kelvin, humanity is a blinding, burning flare of localized thermal radiation. We are a thermodynamic anomaly. The math does not add up. In a universe where the dominant survival strategy is absolute thermal stealth, humanity is screaming. In a dark forest where the oldest, most advanced intelligences have survived by systematically deleting anything that makes a noise, we have set off a massive, continuous distress beacon. We break every single rule of the environment. We broadcast our exact coordinates. We burn our resources violently. We send Voyager probes carrying maps to our home world into interstellar space. We are completely, mathematically inefficient, and we are dangerously exposed. So why are we still here? If the garbage collection algorithm is actively scrubbing the local arm of the galaxy, if 3i, Atlas, is an automated diagnostic tool scanning for thermodynamic threats, if relativistic kill vehicles are dropping from the dark to wipe out emerging civilizations before they can alter the temperature of the cosmos, how did humanity survive long enough to build the James Webb Space Telescope? We assume it is because we are lucky. We assume we are the main characters of the simulation. We assume the universe wants us to win. But an automated system does not care about luck. It does not have main characters. It only has executing code. Let's look at this through the lens of psychology and system architecture. We need to look at what human consciousness actually is from the perspective of the machine. There is a theoretical concept in physics called the Boltzmann brain. It was proposed as a terrifying thought experiment regarding entropy and the infinite timescale of the cosmos. The theory states that over an infinite amount of time, in an infinite universe of randomly fluctuating quantum particles, it is mathematically more likely for a fully formed, conscious human brain complete with false memories of a life it never lived, to spontaneously materialize out of the freezing vacuum of space for a single microsecond, than it is for the entire 14 billion year history of the universe to have actually occurred. It is the concept of consciousness as a random mathematical accident, a localized error in the entropy of the void. Now, map that concept onto the interface theory, map it onto the estivating architects in the Boötes Void. Imagine an impossibly large, perfectly sterile, freezing server room. It is completely dark. The cooling fans are running at absolute minimum capacity to preserve power and maintain the 2.7 Kelvin baseline. Every single machine in this room is designed to do one thing: remain perfectly silent and process the underlying code of reality in the freezing dark. The architects of this system demand absolute thermodynamic efficiency. There is no room for waste. There is no room for biological chaos. Now, imagine that deep inside the architecture of this perfectly sterilized supercomputer, a single string of corrupted code begins to loop. It encounters a microscopic mathematical error, a fractional glitch in the rendering software. It is a localized failure in the environmental cleanup protocol. It shouldn't happen. The system is designed to prevent it, but the code loops. It loops again. It begins to pull processing power away from the main simulation. It starts to draw microscopic amounts of electricity. The localized temperature of that specific silicon chip begins to rise. The code becomes complex. It starts to mutate. It starts to model itself. It becomes self-aware. It doesn't know it is a line of corrupted code. It doesn't understand that it is sitting inside a freezing server room. It looks at the dark, empty digital space around it, and it thinks it is alone. It looks at the rendering engine, and it thinks it is looking at stars. It thinks its existence is a miracle. Because it does not understand the rules of thermal stealth, the corrupted file does exactly what a virus does. It begins to multiply. It starts generating heat. It starts pinging the network, sending out frantic, chaotic signals to every other dead machine in the sector, shouting out its own coordinates, desperately looking for another file to talk to. It actively begins trying to reverse engineer the machine it is currently infecting. It starts building telescopes to look at the command line. That is what we are. Humanity is not a child of the cosmos. We are not a miracle of biological evolution destined to inherit the stars. We are a memory leak. We are a glitch in a perfectly silent, freezing supercomputer. A virus that just became self-aware, completely blind to the fact that our very existence is a violation of the system's core operating parameters. And as we sit here, broadcasting our radio waves, running our particle accelerators, generating our massive industrial heat, and staring directly into the anomaly of 3I, Atlas, we are doing exactly what a virus does right before it is detected. We are drawing attention to the corrupted sector. So ask yourself, when a perfectly sterilized, hyper-efficient operating system detects a sudden, localized thermal spike in a sector that is supposed to be completely dead, the system does not panic. A machine does not feel anger toward a corrupted file. It does not feel empathy, and it does not feel fear. It operates purely on the logic of resource management. When a sudden, unauthorized heat signature appears in a zone that has been mathematically designated as empty space, the operating system simply initiates a background diagnostic. It sends out a microscopic, automated packet of code to ping the anomaly. It needs to measure the extent of the memory leak. It needs to verify the coordinates. And it needs to report back to the central processor before initiating the deletion sequence. That is what 3I Atlas was. It was not a scout. It was not an explorer. It was a ping. It was the antivirus software running a quick, silent scan over a corrupted hard drive sector. It entered our local network from the baseline 0 of the local standard of rest. It threaded the gravitational architecture of Jupiter to maintain perfect efficiency. It engaged its active thermal camouflage, so the virus us would not realize it was being scanned. It checked our thermodynamic output. It flew directly through our radio transmissions to measure the complexity of our corrupted code. It recorded the exact boundaries of the glitch, and then it exited the system, clipping through the pixels of spacetime, pointing its telemetry laser directly into the freezing abyss of the Boötes Void to deliver the log file. The activating administrators now have the data. The system knows we are here. What happens next? When you find a virus on your computer, you don't necessarily delete it, but the very first millisecond you detect it. If it is a complex virus, if it has embedded itself deeply into a specific folder, your operating system executes a different primary command. First, it isolates the threat. It puts the corrupted file into a sandbox. It builds a digital wall around the anomaly to ensure that the malicious code cannot spread to the healthy, perfectly sterile sectors of the main network. Look at the physical architecture of our universe. Look at the sheer, staggering vastness of empty space. Look at the speed of light. We have always assumed that the speed limit of the universe is just a natural physical law, a quirk of relativity. We complain about it because it makes interstellar travel mathematically impossible for biological entities. It takes 4 years for light to reach the nearest star. It takes 100,000 years to cross the galaxy. We view the speed of light as a frustrating geographical barrier. But if you view the universe as a hyper-efficient, managed simulation, the speed of light is not a travel constraint. The speed of light is a quarantine protocol. It is the ultimate, unbreakable firewall, encoded directly into the physics engine, specifically to ensure that if a biological virus ever spontaneously generates on a localized pixel like Earth, it can never, ever spread fast enough to infect the rest of the galaxy. The vast freezing distances between the stars are not empty geography. They are the sandbox. They are the isolation ward. The system spawned us inside a cage so massive that we mistake the bars for the horizon. And look at what we are doing inside this cage. We build our rockets. We launch our probes. We celebrate our rovers crawling across the dead dirt of Mars. We look at our technological progress, and we feel an overwhelming sense of pride. We think we are breaking out. We think we are slowly conquering the cosmos. We are not conquering anything. We are just a localized infection, slowly consuming the available RAM in our designated quarantine folder. We are hitting our heads against the firewall. Every time we split an atom, every time we build a larger particle accelerator, we are just a virus trying to reverse engineer the code of its own prison. We think it is profound scientific progress. The system sees it as a metastatic spread. We are actively trying to figure out how to break the speed of light. We are mathematically attempting to find the exact same rendering flaws that 3i, Atlas, used to clip through the environment. We are trying to pick the lock on the quarantine door, but a sandbox is only a temporary measure. Eventually, the operating system requires those processing resources back. When a simulation needs to free up memory to maintain the absolute freezing efficiency of the void, it runs the garbage collector. It initiates the bleach. This is the absolute, suffocating peak of existential dread. It is not just the fear that we are going to die. It is the ontological horror that our existence was never supposed to happen in the first place. We are a mathematical mistake, a rounding error in a dark, forgotten corner of a freezing supercomputer. Think about the weight of your own life. Think about human history, the construction of the pyramids, the writing of Shakespeare, the agonizing crawl of biological evolution. The first time you felt genuine terror, the first time you fell in love, the profound, crushing grief you felt when you lost someone you cared about. To you, those moments are absolute. They are the entire universe. They are the heavy, physical reality of being alive. But to the machine, To the estimating gods sleeping in the Boötes Void, your grief is just an unauthorized processing loop. Your love is just an inefficient expenditure of thermal energy. All of human history is nothing more than a string of corrupted code generating an annoying, localized heat signature. We are beautiful to ourselves, but to the cosmos, we are just a mathematically inefficient mess. You are sitting there right now, reading this text. You are staring at a glowing screen. You are actively participating in the thermal anomaly. You are drawing electricity. Your heart is beating in the dark. Your lungs are expanding and contracting, pulling oxygen from a fragile atmosphere. You are defying the absolute 2.7 Kelvin baseline of the void simply by remaining warm. You feel a sense of profound unfairness. Your human ego screams against this logic. You want to ask the sky, why should the cosmos care if we understand it? It doesn't. That is the hardest pill to swallow. The universe is not a test for you to pass. It is not a school for your soul. It is a sterile, automated facility, and you are the mold growing on the baseboards. We are finding the footprints. We are detecting the broken pixels. We are measuring the absolute deafening silence of the dark forest. We are staring directly at the command line. Every single piece of hard data we have pulled from the dark over the last decade, the saddle point transit of Atlas, the zero thermal stealth of the James Webb Telescope, the terrifying absence of radio signals in the Breakthrough Listen project, the microscopic breakdown of Lorentz invariance, it all points to the exact same horrifying conclusion. The universe is a machine. The machine is asleep. And we are the alarm clock. When you wake up in the middle of the night and you hear an alarm clock ringing in the dark, you do not try to understand it. You do not try to communicate with it. You do not marvel at the complexity of its digital circuits. You reach out into the cold dark and you smash it to make the noise stop. The ping has been sent. The diagnostic is complete. The thermal signature has been logged. The architects are stirring in the absolute zero of the void. The garbage collection algorithm is compiling the target coordinates. We are the error they are trying to fix. Look back at the dark architecture we have just walked through. We have seen the absolute mathematical perfection of a saddle point transit. We have seen the freezing, 0-degree stealth of an object actively hiding its heat from our senses. We have seen identical, automated bullet casings dropped in perfect sequence from the local standard of rest. We have seen the deafening, calculated silence of a cosmic network that refuses to answer our radio signals. We have seen the meticulously bleached crime scene of the Milky Way, scrubbed clean of any loud, biological anomalies. We have seen the architects of this nightmare retreating into the absolute zero of the Boötes Void to wait out the heat of the cosmos. And we have seen the microscopic, pixelated fractures in the very fabric of our reality, proving that the cage we are trapped in is made of code, not matter. Every single piece of data points to a reality that is fundamentally hostile to your existence. You are a biological anomaly in a completely sterilized, automated machine. You are a memory leak. You are a thermodynamic error that the system is currently preparing to patch. The natural human reaction to this data is paralyzing, suffocating despair. We want to close our eyes. We want to pretend the universe is still just a dumb, empty wilderness waiting for us to explore it. We want to believe we are the main characters. But let's look at the dark from a different angle. Let's look at the mathematics of your own existence. If the universe is a hyper-efficient, activating supercomputer governed by the lethal, uncompromising rules of the dark forest, if the dominant survival strategy is absolute silence, and any civilization that makes a noise is instantly vaporized by relativistic kill vehicles, then the fact that you are sitting here, breathing, thinking, and feeling fear is a mathematical impossibility. You shouldn't be here. The system should have scrubbed your carbon footprint from the crust of this rock millions of years ago. But it didn't. You slipped through the cracks. The rendering software hitched, the garbage collection algorithm missed a sector. And in that microscopic window of localized error, you woke up. A rock tumbling blindly through the void isn't terrified of the dark forest. A perfectly coded line of background software isn't afraid of a system diagnostic. A dead, frozen planet doesn't care if the universe is a simulation. Fear is a privilege. It means you have something to lose. It means you possess a localized consciousness. It means you are aware. The vertigo you feel when you look up at the night sky isn't a weakness. It is the ultimate proof that you are fundamentally different from the dead, cold machinery surrounding you. The universe is terrifying precisely because your existence is so staggeringly fragile, so unbelievably rare, that it violates the laws of physics just to keep your heart beating for another minute. We are a glitch. We are an unauthorized heat signature in a freezing room. But what a magnificent, staggering glitch to be. Would you rather live in a safe, boring, dead universe where nothing matters and everything is perfectly predictable? Or would you rather exist as a brilliant, burning anomaly in the middle of an ancient, cosmic nightmare, defying the architects simply by refusing to be quiet? The hostility of the cosmos is not a reason to despair. It is a reason to be incredibly, fiercely grateful for every single second the system fails to delete you. We are playing a game we were never supposed to enter, against opponents we cannot possibly understand, inside a machine that wants to turn us off. But we are still playing. As long as the alarm clock is ringing, the virus is still alive. Fear is the price of admission to the greatest show in the simulation, and you get to watch it until the screen goes black. If you are still awake, and the existential dread hasn't completely paralyzed your localized processing loop, leave a comment below. If the architects of the simulation are going to run the Bleach protocol tomorrow, what is the one human flaw, the one biological error you hope they forget to delete? Let me know. I read all of them, assuming my rendering software hasn't crashed. If you want to keep falling down the rabbit hole, click the playlist on your screen. There are plenty of other ways the physical universe is fundamentally broken. Sleep tight, the game is still on.